The UAV forces of the Ukrainian Armed Forces carried out strikes on targets within Russian territory. One of these targets was the Lipetsk substation with a capacity of 500 kilowatts. The strike was confirmed by Robert Brovdi, the commander of the UAV forces. According to him, 5 substations on Russian territory were hit overnight. Meanwhile, on the front line, since the beginning of the day, 95 combat clashes have been recorded. This was reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. More details about the situation on the battlefield are coming up next.
Fighters from the Aquila UAV company of the Steel Border Brigade are effectively using strike drones and bomber drones against Russian occupiers in the Kursk and North Slobozhanske directions. Over the past day, the pilots struck several enemy shelters and communication antennas. Intercepted radio communications confirmed that at least 2 Russian servicemen were eliminated. Meanwhile, in the Kupiansk direction, the aggressor carried out assault operations near Stepnaya Novoselovka, Petropavlovka, Kurilovka, and Peshanoye. On the Slavyansk section of the front, clashes were recorded near the settlements of Serebryanka, Dronovka, Fyodorovka, and towards Seversk. And near Pokrovsk, the Russian occupiers attacked in particular near Nikonorovka, Mirnograd, Nikolaevka, Novoekonomicheskoye, Kotlin, Daknoye, and Filia.
And, as we have already noted, strikes on reserves that will be moving. This kind of comprehensive approach allows not only to unblock certain areas and especially those directions that the enemy is now trying to control. This includes logistics and access to Pokrovsk and Mirnograd themselves, because without this, our defense will not be effective. And this approach over the past day, the most recent one, we see is working very actively. And it is producing results. That is the most important thing. The enemy has no prospects of capturing Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, or accordingly making new incursions, whether by small groups or larger formations.
The defense forces of Ukraine are not allowing the Russians to advance toward Kostiantynivka. According to the spokesperson of the 11th Army Corps of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Dmytro Zaporizhets, Ukrainian troops control the settlement of Stupochki, which was destroyed by Russia, and are actively destroying the enemy. The invaders will likely focus their efforts on Kostiantynivka, using equipment and reserves, and will also continue their offensive in the Pokrovsk direction. He also reported that the Russians are actively using tactical aviation, dropping bombs to destroy the city.
We are actively destroying the enemy and not allowing them to advance toward Kostiantynivka. Although the enemy will likely focus its subsequent efforts specifically in the direction of Kostiantynivka, particularly deploying its most powerful reserves there. There was a period of time when the so-called Dobropilsky salient was formed. For about a month, the enemy focused its efforts on using tactical aviation, dropping glide bombs on that area. However, after the Ukrainian Armed Forces managed to eliminate the salient along with the Russian occupiers, the enemy once again concentrated its efforts on using glide bombs against the city of Kostiantynivka. Dmytro Zaporozhets, spokesperson for the 11th Army Corps of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, speaking live on the United News Marathon.
The Security Service of Ukraine carried out a series of precise strikes on territories temporarily occupied by Russian forces. They struck locations where the occupiers' equipment was concentrated, which was used for logistics and the distribution of Russian occupation forces, as well as the deployment sites of Russian army personnel. The nighttime strikes were carried out using FP-2 drones equipped with 105-kilogram warheads. This ensured the high effectiveness of the operation. SBU fighters also struck a tanker and oil infrastructure in Russia's Tuapse. According to Freedom sources, drones from the Alpha Special Operations Center attacked the facility together with other security agencies. 5 hits were recorded. The tanker caught fire and oil loading stands and port buildings were also damaged. The port of Tuapse includes an oil terminal and a refinery owned by Rosneft.
The security service continues to strike at Russia's oil refining infrastructure, which supplies the enemy with resources for aggression against Ukraine. As long as the war continues, explosions at Russian refineries will continue. Source: Freedom in the SBU.
Over the past day, Ukraine's defense forces have eliminated 940 Russian occupiers. Thus, Russia's total combat losses since the start of the full-scale war have already exceeded 1,143,000 people. In addition, the day before, the defense forces destroyed 4 Russian armored vehicles and 25 artillery systems. Also, 121 units of enemy automotive equipment were burned.
North Korean soldiers who were captured and are now in Kiev are asking not to be sent back home. 2 North Korean servicemen have requested to be sent to South Korea, not North Korea. They made this statement to a South Korean human rights organization during an interview for a documentary film. According to Seoul, around 10,000 North Korean soldiers may have been sent to Russia to fight against Ukraine. It is also reported that about 2,000 North Korean soldiers have been killed as a result of the fighting in Ukraine. Today, on the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres noted in his statement that journalists face threats, attacks, imprisonment, and even murder. And almost all crimes against them remain unsolved.
The digital space must be safe for those who report the news. When journalists are silenced, we all lose our voice. Let us protect press freedom together, demand accountability, and ensure that those who speak truth to power can do so without fear. Antonio Guterres, Secretary-General of the United Nations.
The National Committee of Ukraine for Cooperation with the UNESCO International Programme for the Development of Communication has called on international partners to intensify their efforts. Actions are needed to protect journalists and hold accountable those responsible for crimes against media representatives committed by Russia. As the committee reminded, since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, 116 journalists have been killed. Of these, 18 were killed while carrying out their professional duties. On October 23rd, our colleagues in Kramatorsk were also killed. Journalist Aliona Gramova and cameraman Yevgeny Karmazin were documenting the aftermath of a Russian shelling. Their car at a gas station was attacked by a Russian Lancet drone. In addition, journalist Viktoria Roshchina also became a victim of the Russians. She disappeared in August 2023 during a trip to territories temporarily occupied by Russia. In April 2024, the Russian Federation confirmed for the first time that it had been illegally detaining her. After that, Victoria's father received a message about her death. The Ukrainian side was only able to recover Victoria's body in April 2025. Turkey is ready to once again act as a mediator in peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. This was stated by Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. According to him, Ankara could host a fourth round as well as a potential leaders' summit in Istanbul. Fidan emphasized that Turkey will continue to support diplomatic efforts to achieve peace and is ready to provide its platform for direct negotiations between Kiev and Moscow.
3 rounds of negotiations between the Russian and Ukrainian delegations in Istanbul led to tangible results, in particular to prisoner exchanges and the resumption of direct dialogue between the sides. We sincerely believe that diplomacy remains the only way to a peaceful resolution of the war in Ukraine. Hakan Fidan, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey, during his speech at the TRT World Forum.
Ukraine has repeatedly stated its readiness for realistic negotiations with Russia at any time in any country. This was stated by Mikhailo Podolyak, advisor to the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, on the Freedom TV channel. However, according to him, such meetings are better held at the level of leaders, because only then is it possible to reach any decisions. As a rule, Russia sends fictitious delegations to the negotiations.
The platform in Turkey made it possible to resolve several humanitarian issues, meaning an increase in the number of prisoner exchanges, exchanges of bodies and so on. But there have been no significant breakthroughs. Nevertheless, Turkey is always truly ready to act as a powerful organizer, a strong logistics provider, and that's very good. That is, Turkey is interested, given its fundamental interest in peace in the region and its interest in the Black Sea area. Undoubtedly, Turkey is ready at any moment to organize the negotiation process as quickly and efficiently as possible. So another point, let me return to it and sum up here. First, Russia is not ready for a real negotiation process. Second, it is not ready to stop the war. And third, for Putin to stop living in this painful reality that he is immersed in and frankly loves: mass violence.
At present, there is no need for a meeting between the Russian dictator Putin and US President Donald Trump to resolve the war in Ukraine. This was stated by Kremlin spokesperson Peskov to Russian media. At the same time, he added that right now there is a need, as he put it again, Peskov said, a very painstaking work on the details. Problems of settlement. Let me remind you that earlier, Donald Trump announced his intention to hold a personal meeting with Putin in Budapest. It was supposed to be coordinated by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. However, after their very first phone conversation, Trump canceled the summit with Putin himself. Meanwhile, the US and China have agreed to establish a direct line between their armed forces to prevent possible conflicts. This was reported by Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth. after a conversation with China's Minister of National Defense Dong Jun. According to Hegseth, both sides agreed to create military communication channels to de-escalate conflicts and prevent new problems. Peace, stability, and good relations are the best way forward, Hegseth emphasized. The governments of the US and China will continue negotiations to clarify the details of establishing such communication channels. Turkey's largest oil refineries have started purchasing more non-Russian oil. This was reported by Reuters. This happened after the latest sanctions were imposed against Moscow. A Turkish refinery owned by the Azerbaijani company SOCAR has purchased 4 batches of oil from Iraq, Kazakhstan, and other producing countries. Last month, this refinery primarily used Russian oil. But now, the share of non-Russian oil in processing will increase to 120,000 barrels per day. Another major Turkish refinery, Tüpraş, plans to stop purchasing Russian oil for one of its plants in order to maintain fuel exports to Europe. For the first time in many years, Russia has recorded a decrease in the consumption of staple food products. This was reported by the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. And according to the center, the problems in the Russian economy caused by the war and international sanctions have led to a reduction in food consumption. In particular, there has been a decline in the consumption of meat, certain grains, and milk by the population. Due to the rapid rise in food prices, even with supposedly higher incomes, Russians can afford less.
While Russian propaganda tries to convince Russian citizens that their real incomes are supposedly growing and that the economy, despite sanctions, is in good shape, in reality, ordinary Russians are literally being forced to tighten their belts. The only reason for the worsening living conditions of Russians is the ongoing war against Ukraine, which demands ever-increasing expenditures that the Kremlin extracts from the pockets of its own people. From a report by the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine on Telegram,
cutting back on food has become the norm in Russia. This is also confirmed by the Ukrainian Foreign Intelligence Service. A third of Russians admit that they have to limit themselves when buying groceries. Shoppers are being forced to switch from mid-priced goods to cheaper and often much lower quality products. Discount stores, chains that offer the cheapest goods, are benefiting from this. Their share of the Russian market has already exceeded 60%. My colleague Victoria Chistukina will continue on this topic.
Russia's economy is slowing down rapidly. According to the July forecast by the International Monetary Fund, by the end of 2025, Russia's GDP growth will slow to 0.9% and in 2026 to 1%. For comparison, in 2024 the figure was 4%. But the head of the central bank, Nabulina, insists that talk of a recession is inappropriate. She called on State Duma deputies to, I quote, be responsible with their statements. The deputies in turn tried to find those to blame for the crisis. Although the reasons are obvious, Russia's war against Ukraine is eating up about half of the federal budget. And sanctions, Ukrainian drone strikes, and international isolation prevent recovery and development.
Where is personal responsibility? With all these proposals, the main personal responsibility gets blurred.
Of course, the chairman of the State Duma does not consider himself responsible for the economic collapse. But even official statistics can no longer hide the symptoms of catastrophe.
However, it is not just one sector that is in a dire state, but many. According to calculations by the Center for Macroeconomic Analysis and Short-Term Forecasting, production in the civilian manufacturing sectors, excluding industries dominated by defense production, has been rapidly declining since the beginning of the year. From January to August, output in these sectors has already dropped by 5.4%. In the language of economists, what is being observed in Russian industry is called a frontal decline, comments former first deputy chairman of the central bank Sergei Alexashenko on the latest Rosstat report. Everyone is dancing, that is, falling compared to the first 9 months of last year, except for tobacco product manufacturers, textile producers, and those sectors where statistics hide military production, according to a publication by the Moscow Times.
Experts note that the economy hasn't just cooled down, it has frozen. The situation is especially critical in the coal industry, which until recently was one of the main sources of foreign currency revenue for the budget. Here, the share of unprofitable companies has risen to 67%. The industry's profits have been cut in half, while losses have surged 2.5 times.
The credit market, which should serve as an indicator of trust, is showing the opposite. The share of problematic borrowers among legal entities has reached 23%, and about 165,000 companies are already unable to service their debts. This is a signal that the corporate sector has lost its financial stability. From a statement on the website of the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine.
To patch the hole in the budget, the government has even decided to issue yuan-denominated bonds on the domestic market.
The deficit in the budget, in fact, is growing. It's enormous. 5,700 billion rubles, according to the forecast, the October forecast from the Ministry of Finance, the budget deficit for the current year. Last year, when passing the law, they promised a deficit of 1.2 trillion for this year, but they missed the mark by 5 times. Wonderful economists at the central bank, the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Economic Development. Putin has them, and now they're trying to borrow money somewhere.
Now the Ministry of Finance is looking for options, who to sell UN-denominated securities to, and how. Moscow has been trying for a long time to reach an agreement with Beijing on loans and investments in the Russian economy, but so far without success.
Negotiations went on for 10 years so that Chinese investors could directly buy Russian federal loan bonds. Ideally, they should be offered some attractive yield, and at the same time replace the money that used to come from America and Europe, which, let's say, allowed the Ministry of Finance to increase the national debt and attract budget financing. That didn't happen. The Chinese never set up any bridge, any gateway.
Russians are feeling the consequences of the Kremlin's policies. People in Russia have started eating less. Statistics bear this out. In September and October, food sales in the Federation dropped by 5%. And it's no wonder, given how often price tags change in stores. Since the beginning of 2024, potatoes, for example, have gone up in price by 167%. Beef by 26%, milk by 25%, rye bread by 24%. In other words, the total bill is increasing, but the number of purchases is going down.
Potatoes used to cost 27 rubles per kilo, now it's 45.
31% of Russians say they don't have enough money for food. This is the highest figure in 4 years. And next year, citizens of the Federation will also face an increase in VAT. For the market, this will mean a drop in demand and a new round of inflation. And for the population, even stricter saving measures.
Investors are actively investing in Ukrainian companies that are developing drones and defense technologies. Thus, Western funds have increased their investments in Ukrainian startups, reports the Wall Street Journal. This helps them expand their presence in international markets. One of the largest deals was an investment in a Kiev-based company. It raised $15 million to develop technologies for coordinating drone attacks. Experts predict that after the war ends, Ukrainian companies in the drone sector will gain enormous growth potential and their technologies will be in demand worldwide. Fire strikes, evacuation, delivery of ammunition, and demining. The Barracuda drone boat is capable of carrying out missions in the most challenging conditions. This is a Ukrainian development using modern technologies created by Marine Corps servicemen. You can learn more about the specifics of using the Barracuda in the report by my colleagues.
Fast, maneuverable, unmanned. This is a Ukrainian boat. The Barracuda, which hunts, rescues, and changes the rules of military operations on the water. The surface boat is a development by the Marines of the Special Unit of the 40th Separate Coastal Defense Brigade, 30th Marine Corps. From concept to combat deployment.
The Barracuda was created in order to primarily defend the waters of Kherson and Mykolaiv regions. First and foremost, these are waterborne operations that are directly associated with special missions, thanks to which we are able to specifically disrupt the Russians' plans, namely their plans to advance on the Kherson and Mykolaiv regions.
We both build and operate it ourselves personally with our own hands together, taking our time.
The boat has a modular design. It can be used as a strike platform, a delivery vehicle, or for reconnaissance. The Barracuda is constantly being improved. There are currently 12 modifications, each tailored for specific tasks.
It can either be a kamikaze, carry mines to mine channels, or strike the enemy.
The Barracuda can be utilized as a kamikaze vehicle, as a specialized platform for launching FPV drones, and also to mount and carry various different types of weapons, such as, for example, machine guns or grenade launchers.
The Barracuda is capable of bringing a swarm of drones as close to the target as possible. This reduces flight time over open water and lowers the risk of interception. The drone boat is also able to carry out missions in the most dangerous areas. We
have a modification that allows us to safely and efficiently evacuate the wounded or deliver essential supplies for important logistics purposes. For example, on an isolated island, it can be used to deliver weapons, food, medical equipment, and other necessary items, and so on. This capability greatly enhances operational flexibility and support in challenging environments. First and foremost, this important development allows infantrymen to avoid doing the kind of physically demanding work they had to do. For example, just 3 years ago, when they were required to carry absolutely everything by hand.
The boat is equipped with artificial intelligence and modern tracking systems. It can autonomously navigate through narrow channels and reed-covered wetlands. It can detect targets and plot the optimal route. The Barracuda operates not only in river environments but also at sea.
In open water, which means being in areas of the ocean, sea, or large lakes that are far from the shore and not protected by land, people and animals are exposed to the natural elements.
Working on the water is always risky. The enemy tries to complicate the movement of Ukrainian boats. They create dangerous areas and traps. But even under such conditions, Ukrainian drone operators find solutions and keep working. The Russians,
they aren't standing still either. They mine the water, which involves placing underwater explosives to hinder enemy movement and set up so-called boom barriers, which are floating obstacles designed to block or slow down engines and boats. These defensive measures make it more difficult for enemy forces to navigate the waterways and help protect their own positions. This is a significant problem, but we are actively trying, as they say, to fight against it. We have a variety of different systems that allow us either to evade or to ensure that the mines they drop in the water will detonate first, and then...
According to Marpech, the Barracuda can reach speeds of over 80 kilometers per hour. This makes it a difficult target for Russian drones.
It's quite a challenge to hit a drone that's moving at high speed across the water. It has to be a very skilled and experienced FPV pilot, someone with truly serious and advanced skills, to be able to actually hit it, because, as practice shows, in order to hit it, they typically need to use between 3 and 6 drones to take down a Barracuda. And that too is basically just money they're throwing into the water.
The Barracuda has been in service with the 40th Coastal Defense Brigade for 10 months now. During this time, the drone boat has carried out dozens of operations, 85% of which have been successful. The Russians have not been able to copy the Ukrainian design, and not a single Barracuda has fallen into their hands.